Would you believe the CEO of a multi-million-dollar truck empire walked into his own business undercover, dressed as a broke contractor, just to see how deep the lies went? You're about to find out. Because on a scorching afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, a man named Marcus Taylor pulled up in a dusty Dodge Ram, parked across from the gleaming glass facade of Summit Auto Works, and prepared to confront a nightmare he built with his own hands. But Marcus Taylor wasn't real. Under the sun-worn flannel and scuffed work boots stood Dwayne Johnson, 53 years old, calloused by years of grit, and the undisputed founder of the very dealership now under fire. To the world, Summit Auto Works was a monument to American success. Rows of pristine trucks stood like monuments to muscle and ambition. Flags waved on cue, and polished salesmen glided through the showroom in tailored shirts. Customers walked in dreaming and drove out believing, or so it seemed. Because what the world didn't see were the whispers that had started months earlier. Quiet complaints about hidden fees, contracts changed at the last minute, pressure tactics that turned pride into regret. And when a retired veteran sent a handwritten letter claiming he'd been swindled out of his savings, Dwayne could no longer ignore the rot beneath the chrome. But emails to compliance brought only polite denials. No violations found, they said. No cause for concern. That's when Dwayne Johnson, the man known for shaking hands at ribbon cuttings and delivering speeches about honor, decided to disappear. In his place, he built Marcus, a soft-spoken hauling contractor with $40,000 in cash and no patience for finance tricks. He scrubbed off the Rolex and strapped on a scratched Casio. He even added a limp, a small gesture, a symbol of blue-collar burden. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about immersion. He wanted to feel what his customers felt. From the parking lot across the street, he studied the showroom like a general reading a battlefield. Inside, behind the glass, a man named Eli Carter leaned against a railing, tall, sharp, with a smile too smooth to be honest. The new sales manager, young, hungry, fast-rising, and maybe the reason the name Summit Auto Works no longer meant what it used to. Dwayne stepped out into the heat, his baseball cap pulled low. Every move was calculated, every moment a test. As he pushed open the door, letting the cool air hit his sunburnt neck, he wasn't just a customer, he was a hunter entering his own house, searching for the wolves he once trusted to guard the door. The scorching North Carolina sun threw a glare off the polished windows of Summit Auto Works, a dealership that had become a local symbol of success. But beneath that glinting facade, something was festering, and Dwayne Johnson, now 53, was about to find out how deep the rot had gone. But not as himself. Today, he was Marcus Taylor, a blue-collar small business owner with a truck to buy, a limp in his walk, and a gas station Casio ticking on his wrist. No press, no security, no email blast announcing a visit. Just a man in boots and flannel, stepping back into a kingdom he wasn't sure still belonged to him. 15 years ago, Dwayne Johnson had poured his entire soul into Summit Auto Works. Not just his money, not just his fame, but his soul. It had started with a single lot, one truck, and a father's wisdom passed down with calloused hands and engine grease. He had built the business not to sell trucks, but to sell trust, something rarer than horsepower in the modern market. It was supposed to be different, no pushy sales tactics, no shady fees, just integrity. But lately, whispers had crept in like oil leaks, complaints, altered contracts, fees that didn't match online quotes. A letter from a retired veteran claiming he was fleeced by $5,000. Dwayne had handed the issues to corporate compliance. The answers? Always the same. No violations found, and yet the stink of something unethical lingered like burnt rubber clinging to concrete. It wasn't the kind of story that started with a bang. It started with silence, with overlooked red flags, with a store manager named Eli Carter whose meteoric rise was just a little too fast, a little too polished. Dwayne had seen his type before: style over substance, profit over people. That was why today's undercover visit wasn't a publicity stunt. It was an autopsy. Marcus Taylor stepped into the showroom, boots scuffed, face shadowed by a baseball cap. The building looked the same. That was the thing about appearances. They aged better than morals. A young salesman, Damien, met him with a practiced grin, the kind that felt printed, not lived. "Morning, sir. Looking for something tough or something pretty?" It was meant to be a joke, but Dwayne caught the judgment in the tone, an assumption wrapped in faux charm. "Marcus," he said, "need something that can haul. Run a business out near Statesville. I don't need chrome, I need grit." Damien perked up. "You've come to the right place. Let me show you our Sierra 1500 line. Heavy duty, real beast." As they walked the lot, Dwayne played his part. $40,000 max, cash in hand, no financing, no games, just a buyer looking to upgrade. But every smile, every pause, every pitch was data. Then came the first flag. "This model here includes our Summit Protection package. Covers just about everything you'd need," Damien said. "Is that in the price?" Dwayne asked, tilting his head. Damien hesitated. Barely a second, but that was enough. "It's standard now," he lied smoothly. "Most customers appreciate the peace of mind." That was a lie, and not just a salesman's fib. The Summit Protection package had always been optional. Always. If it was being baked into the price without consent, it wasn't a perk. It was theft in a tie. They took the truck for a spin. During the test drive, Damien casually mentioned monthly bonuses. The more we help people upgrade their lives, the more the company rewards us. It sounded noble. But Dwayne knew a manipulation when he heard one. Urgency before logic, emotion before clarity, a classic technique. Back inside, Damien sat Dwayne at a desk and pulled up the cost breakdown, and that's when the real show began. Base price, $41,750, plus Summit Protection, plus processing, plus documentation. Dwayne didn't flinch, but then he heard a voice from the desk beside them, raised, desperate. "That's not what we agreed on," the man said. "Middle-aged, weathered uniform, folder in hand." A photo slipped free. 3 kids and a lopsided cake. Dwayne's chest, it tightened. He didn't know this man, but he knew the story. He'd lived it before. His own father crushed by a dealership contract decades ago. The man, Gregory Miller, pleaded. "Josh said $35,000. That's all I got. My family scraped everything for the down payment." Eli Carter emerged from his office, the mask of charm frozen in place. "Verbal discussions are non-binding," he said coldly. "What matters is the signed agreement." Gregory deflated. Dwayne saw it, the collapse of hope, the silent scream of a man cornered by fine print. His deposit, $5,000, non-refundable. His dreams, voided. And just like that, Dwayne's mission changed. This wasn't about understanding anymore. It was about exposing. He turned to Damien. "Line by line," he said. "I want to see every charge." What followed was quietly explosive. Damien, shaken, admitted the truth. "Some fees aren't exactly standard. Eli's got this system. Keep the quote low, hook them, add fees later. By then, they're too deep to back out. Academic theorists might call this incremental exploitation, a slow erosion of consent masked as value. But on the ground, it was just theft." Dwayne asked, "And if a salesman pushes back?" "Demoted, fired, like Josh." Damien handed over a flash drive. "Every shady deal. I kept records. This wasn't a few bad apples. It was a rot at the root. And Dwayne had just found the tree." The scent of new leather and dealership-grade air freshener hit Dwayne's nostrils as he stepped onto the Summit Autoworks lot, every detail of his disguise firmly in place. A worn flannel shirt, boots that had seen better days, and a weather-beaten Casio watch from a gas station rack, all calculated choices to erase his identity as the CEO. He wasn't here to tour. He was here to witness, but not as the boss. Today, he was just another working man with calloused hands and a $40,000 budget. A construction worker, a father, someone who couldn't afford to be tricked. And in that act alone, he had already begun the investigation. A sharp voice sliced through the soft hum of distant engines. "Morning, sir," chirped a young man, named Damien, eager and over-rehearsed, like a high school actor trying to impress on opening night. "Looking for something tough or something pretty?" The question was laced with the kind of easy judgment that only comes from a place of assumption, but Dwayne smiled anyway, keeping the character tight. "I'm Marcus," he said. "Need something that hauls, not something that shines." They strolled past rows of shiny trucks that glinted in the sun like trophies. Damien stopped by a graphite-colored GMC Sierra. He was smooth, too smooth. "This one's right around your budget," he said, "and it includes our Summit Protection Package." That phrase, Summit Protection Package, was the red flag Dwayne had been waiting for. It was meant to be optional, an upgrade. Now it was suddenly standard. A flicker of hesitation from Damien was all Dwayne needed. "That package included in the price?" he asked, his voice gravelly, cautious. Damien blinked. "Yeah, it's standard now," he said, the words slipping too easily from his lips. The lie was small, but it echoed with implications. Hidden fees, upselling tactics, emotional manipulation masked as policy. These weren't isolated incidents, they were symptoms. "Mind if I pop the hood?" Dwayne asked, as Damien opened the latch. His eyes darted toward the showroom glass, twice. Each glance was longer than the last. Dwayne followed the trajectory. There stood Eli Carter, the store's manager, suave, controlled, polished to the point of artificiality, the kind of man who measured people with his eyes before they even opened their mouths. What kind of dealership needed this much observation? From a manager? And why did Damien keep glancing his way like a dog waiting for its owner's command? These were not the actions of a healthy sales floor. These were signs of pressure. Pressure to sell, to lie, to trap. The people who say pressure makes diamonds, Dwayne would later say, never met a crushed soul under commission quotas. The test drive passed with surface charm. Damien laid out the emotional bait, the life upgrade, the status leap, the validation of driving something new. Dwayne pretended to nod along. Back at the desk, the atmosphere shifted. Cold floors, bright lights. Suddenly, this wasn't about trucks anymore. It was about tactics. Damien tapped away at the computer. "Base price is $41,750. With Summit Protection, fees, processing..." He stopped. A crack in the script. A voice rose from the nearby desk. "That's not what we agreed on." A middle-aged man, Gregory Miller by his folder, stood trembling. The photo of 3 kids spilled out from his folder like guilt from a cracked conscience. It was all too familiar. The desperation, the disbelief, the dealership pressure. Dwayne had lived that scene 30 years earlier, beside his father who had nearly lost everything to a handshake and a hidden clause. Eli emerged then, smooth as ever, brushing Gregory off with rehearsed authority. "Verbal agreements aren't binding." Dwayne's pulse ticked like a countdown clock. It took everything in him not to snap. This was the system. Not just a bad apple. It was the tree, the soil, the entire orchard. How many families have they done this too? He thought. How many people left here ashamed, broke, or both? He turned to Damien. "Before I sign, can I get a line-by-line breakdown?" The young man hesitated. Dwayne pushed further, leaning in with faux camaraderie. "Them fees going to show up on mine too?" Damien's shift was slight but telling. Shoulders lowered, eyes checked the surroundings. "Look," he whispered. Some of these fees, they ain't standard. Eli's got this system. He trains us to quote low, sell the dream, and then load the contract at the end. Protection, fees, adjustments by the time people realize they're too deep. Ever push back? Dwayne asked. Josh did, Damien replied. Sold Mr. Miller his truck. Didn't play the game, now he's gone. That was it. The final straw. Dwayne's recorder had been running since he walked in, and now he had everything. A paper trail disguised as a conversation. The worst part? It was working. People trusted Summit because of what it used to be. Now it was being used against them. Some characters don't enter with fanfare, Dwayne thought. They emerge through tension, like Damien, a foot soldier in a war he didn't ask for. The question wasn't if the system was corrupt. The question was how deep it ran, and who else had a shovel in their hands, and still he didn't blow his cover. Not yet. There was more to see, more to hear. The rot wasn't just in the policies, it was in the culture, the silence, the laugh, shared between two employees when they thought no one was listening. That day, Dwayne Johnson came face to face with the ghost of the company he'd built. And it didn't look anything like him, but the reckoning, oh, it was coming. He stood, adjusted his cap and said, "Let's keep going." And just like that, the lesson began, not with a shout, but with a whisper hidden in plain sight. What if the person you trusted to lead your dream was quietly poisoning it? By the time Dwayne Johnson, still posing as Marcus Taylor, had shaken hands with the overly eager salesman Damien, the sunlight was already casting long shadows across the concrete lot of Summit Auto Works. But the real shadow was inside, cast not by the setting sun, but by a man named Eli Carter. Sharp-suited, handsome and smooth-talking, Eli wasn't just the sales manager, he was the one engineering the rot from the inside out. Inside the glass showroom, the shift in tone was unmistakable. Where the lot was casual and sun-soaked, the interior felt like a stage, cold and calculated. The moment Damien sat Dwayne down and began typing away on his terminal, the mask came off. The numbers didn't lie, but they did mislead. A 41,750 base sticker was only the start. Suddenly, there were protection plans, documentation charges, market adjustments. It was like watching someone build a sandcastle with one hand while digging a hole under it with the other. But then came the moment that changed everything. A voice cracked from the next desk. Desperate, tired, honest. "That's not what we agreed on." Dwayne didn't need to look fully to understand. The voice of a working man being gutted. He turned his head just enough to see a weathered man, clutching a manila folder, the edges curling from the tightness of his grip. His shirt was a uniform, faded from too many washes. A small photograph had slipped free onto the desk. 3 children, arms wrapped around each other, birthday cake in the middle, one candle crooked. Dwayne's jaw locked. He didn't know this man, but he'd been him once. A long time ago, back when every dollar mattered more than pride. "Mr. Miller," Eli said smoothly as he stepped out of his office, wearing arrogance like cologne. "The fees are clearly listed in the agreement." His voice was gentle, almost comforting, but every syllable was a blade. "Perhaps you should have read more carefully." The trap was sprung, the contract non-refundable, the deposit gone. If the sale fell through, it was a shakedown written in legalese. Eli's tone never faltered. This wasn't an accident. It was a method, a design, a system. And it had worked. On a man who had likely skipped meals just to afford that deposit. That's when it became real for Dwayne. He wasn't just investigating complaints anymore. He was standing in the middle of the very betrayal he feared. And now it had a face, the truly bizarre part. Eli's audacity. He wasn't hiding it, not really. The whole dealership was a masquerade. And in this twisted play, he was the director. Everything followed his cue, right down to how silence fell. across the floor after his pronouncement. You can pay the extra by Friday or walk away and lose it all. How many had been played like this before? How many walked in looking for hope and walked out with heartbreak? That's the academic debate, isn't it? At what point does procedure become predation? When does policy stop being about protection and start being about manipulation? As Mr. Miller's shoulders collapsed, Dwayne felt a part of himself ignite. But this wasn't the time to explode. No, this was the time to gather, observe, confirm. And so, with calm precision, he leaned toward Damien and asked for a full, itemized breakdown, just like a cautious buyer should. Every smile Damien forced, every glance toward Eli's office, it all told Dwayne what he needed to know. Fear and obedience had replaced ethics, and then the unexpected happened. Damien cracked, not loudly, not fully, but just enough. "Some of these fees, they ain't exactly standard," he muttered, and like a slow leak in a dam, the rest followed. Eli's system, the forced add-ons, the emotional baiting, the punishment for disobedient. Staff, the name Josh surfaced, the same man who sold Mr. Miller that truck, the one who refused to cheat. Fired, silenced. Dwayne pressed his shirt lightly. The recorder was still rolling. Good. Let the truth bleed out on tape. Even stranger. The culture had become so normalized, so systemic, that Damien didn't even seem to realize how monstrous it all sounded. He just looked tired, broken, like a man who wanted to do right but had been trained to survive wrong. Survival of the fittest, Eli would later say, unknowingly foreshadowing his own downfall. And here's where things twist again. As Dwayne stepped into the hallway under the pretense of using the restroom, he wandered past the finance office. Two employees joked, unaware of who walked by. Signed so fast, he didn't even ask about the protection plan. Laughter, mockery, a scam so well-oiled it had become muscle memory. Then Dwayne passed the break room, the customer lounge. A farmer mumbled over a contract he didn't understand. A retired couple debated a rebate they probably never received. These weren't random anecdotes. These were symptoms of rot, institutional rot. It wasn't just Eli, it wasn't just Damien, it wasn't just Josh's termination. It was the silence, the complicity, the eerie absence of questions. Those characters who suddenly appear, are they disrupting the system or revealing it? It's a question we ask when whistleblowers come forward, when leaders like Dwayne, dressed as janitors or laborers, or Marcus Taylor, decide to stop pretending. What they expose is never just one man. It's culture, corruption as culture. By the time Dwayne returned to Damien's desk, he knew what had to happen next, but not before one last mask was removed. "Can I talk to your manager?" he asked. The words were deliberate, icy. The setup was complete. Damien nodded. Eli Carter emerged, smiling like a politician, a man who had spent years perfecting the game, never realizing he was about to lose it. And just like that, the next chapter began. How much would someone lie if they thought no one important was watching? When Eli Carter stepped out of his glass-paneled office, he moved like a man who believed the world owed him applause. His tailored vest hugged his chest, the glint of his gold watch catching the showroom lights just enough to feel deliberate. His smile was perfect, controlled. He extended a hand toward Marcus Taylor, and behind those eyes, Dwayne Johnson saw it all, the calculation, the assumption, the complete confidence that the man in front of him was nobody important. "Mr. Taylor," Eli began, "I hear you've got some questions. Why don't we step into my office?" Dwayne followed, without a word, matching Eli's calm step for step. The door shut behind them with a hush that seemed rehearsed. Inside, the office was curated for power. Dark leather chairs, polished wood shelves, a screen showing happy families posing beside trucks, likely the same families who later found Hidden fees on page 4 of their contract. A signed baseball sat on display behind Eli's desk, a gift, perhaps, from a local politician. Another trade made for trust. "So," Eli began as he sat, his tone silky and sure, "you've got concerns. About the price breakdown, huh?" Dwayne removed his cap slowly, setting it on his lap, revealing more of his face, but still not enough for recognition. His voice was still Marcus Taylor's, gruff and cautious. "Saw what happened out there with that other fellow, didn't?" "Sit right. All those fees just showing up like ghosts." Eli gave a low, rehearsed laugh. "You're observant. But don't worry, each customer's deal is different. Mr. Miller's situation doesn't apply to yours." "But it could, right?" Dwayne asked, leaning forward slightly. "I mean, same truck, same sheet, same protection plan that just shows up." Eli paused, then smiled again. "Let me be straight with you, Mr. Taylor. This business isn't about trucks. It's about aspiration, status. People don't come here for horsepower. They come for a feeling, a dream." He stood and walked to the window, gesturing toward the lot. "They think they're buying a truck, but what they're really buying is pride." There it was, the real voice behind the suit. And it didn't stop. We walk them through the dream. We let them picture it. Then the numbers don't matter anymore. They stretch their budget, not because they want to, but because they don't want to feel like they lost. The most disturbing part wasn't the content. It was the comfort with which it was delivered. As if this weren't manipulation, but mastery. Academic debate might ask, Dwayne thought, is this psychological salesmanship or ethical erosion disguised as strategy? Then came the moment Dwayne had been waiting for. The moment that turned the room from an interview into a confession. "You know," Eli said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I could make that protection plan disappear, off the books, quietly. Just takes a little consideration." He tapped the edge of a folder with one finger. Dwayne froze, not outwardly but internally, like a switch had flipped. Eli Carter had just offered a bribe to a stranger he thought was a working man. No hesitation, no shame, just an opportunity for discretion. "You'd be surprised how many smart customers take that deal." Eli chuckled. "They get the truck, I move another unit, win-win." Dwayne's voice was steel, except the folks who ain't smart enough to ask. Eli didn't even blink. "Survival of the fittest, the ones who matter know how to play the game." That was it. That was the heartbeat of the system. The lie beneath the smile. And then Eli, confident, careless, leaned back and sealed his fate. "Honestly, I've made more in kickbacks this year than Reed probably makes in legit profit. That old man's a dinosaur, corporate puppet. I run this place." Dwayne reached into his pocket and brushed the voice recorder with his fingers. Still running, still catching every syllable. But this wasn't a recording anymore. This was war. Slowly, purposefully, Dwayne stood up. The movement was deliberate, weighty, final. "Actually, Eli," he said, his voice deeper now, closer to his own, "I think what we really need to talk about is your employment status." He reached up and took off the cap. The fluorescent light caught his face full on. Recognition hit Eli like a wrecking ball. His smirk collapsed. His body lurched back as if struck. "Mr. Reed, I didn't realize," he stammered, nearly knocking his chair over. "I know," Dwayne said evenly. He pulled the phone from his pocket and tapped play. Eli's own voice began to echo across the room. "Reed's a ghost. Kickbacks. Discretion goes both ways." The voice that had bragged now became damning. It filled the space like poison flooding a sealed room. Dwayne didn't speak again. He opened the office door, stepped back into the main floor, and headed toward the dealership intercom. His hands were steady now, his pace calm. He pressed the button. "All staff to the showroom floor. Immediately. This is Dwayne Johnson." The room fell into stunned silence. Behind him, Eli Carter stood frozen. No vest, no charm, no escape. What followed would shake the foundation of the company, but that comes next. For now the unmasking had begun, and the lie had nowhere left to hide. There are moments when time doesn't move. It collapses, it shrinks, into a silence so heavy it presses on every shoulder in the room. That was the silence that blanketed the Summit Auto Works showroom when Dwayne Johnson's voice, no longer Marcus Taylor's, boomed from the intercom. All staff to the showroom. Floor immediately! This is Dwayne Johnson! People emerged from behind desks, offices, hallways, and break rooms like figures walking out of fog. Some confused, some worried, some already wide-eyed. For many of them, it was the first time they had ever seen the man whose name sat above the front door. Not the one on the business cards, the real man, the founder, the owner, the architect of the very foundation they'd forgotten they were standing on. Eli Carter followed Dwayne like a man heading to his own execution. Gone was the crisp gait, the polished demeanor. What remained was twitching panic, barely hidden behind a rapidly fading smile. Dwayne didn't rush. He stood dead center of the showroom floor. His stance was solid, legs planted wide, voice calm, but loaded with purpose. For those of you who don't know me, he began, eyes sweeping across a growing sea of stunned faces. My name is Dwayne Johnson, and 15 years ago, I started this business with a simple mission: build a dealership where trust isn't just a word we print on a banner, where families walk in and don't have to read 5 pages of fine print to feel safe. He paused. What I discovered today, his gaze landed on Eli, is that trust has been sold piece by piece, traded for commission checks, trampled under paperwork filled with fake incentives and hidden fees. A murmur rippled through the staff. Eyes darted, feet shifted. Guilt was an odor, and it was thick in the air. And you, Mr. Carter, Dwayne said, turning to Eli, you turned this place into your playground, a stage for performance deception. Eli raised his hands. This is a misunderstanding. That recording, that was out of context. Dwayne didn't flinch. Touch your computer, he said evenly, and I'll have you arrested for destruction of evidence. Our IT team is already backing up your files. Every document, every buried complaint. He turned toward security. Escort Mr. Carter off the premises. Now, do not let him touch anything on his way out. 2 security guards stepped forward. Eli's face twisted. You're making a mistake, he snapped. You think you can run this place without me? Without my system. Dwayne stared straight through him. I'd rather earn an honest dollar than steal 100. That line landed like a hammer. As Eli was dragged away, the staff stood frozen, paralyzed, some watching the door, others watching Dwayne. A few dropped their heads. He turned back to them, this time his voice not angry, but resolute. I know some of you were part of this. I know some of you weren't. I also know some of you tried to push back and got punished for it. Silence. Starting today, that changes. We're freezing all pending sales. Every contract from the last 6 months will be reviewed. He scanned the room slowly. If you participated in this corruption and come forward now with full documentation, we'll talk. If you hide it, we will find it, and you will be prosecuted. The pause after that statement stretched long. Then, something incredible happened. A single hand rose. Trina, a service rep from inventory, with tired eyes and quiet strength, stepped forward. I told him it was wrong, she said, loud enough for all to hear. He moved me to inventory after I refused to lie. Then came Damien, the young salesman who had first shown Marcus Taylor the truck. He stepped up, head lowered, and reached into his pocket. I kept records, he said, holding up a flash drive. Every deal I was forced to manipulate, every hidden fee, every family who was pushed past their limit. Others began to move. Some stepped forward cautiously, ashamed. Others came forward as if finally unburdened, a chain reaction of truth-telling. One by one, the truth spilled out, not from fear, but from relief. The lie was broken, and its pieces were falling at the feet of the man who had unknowingly given them a new way forward. Then, from the showroom entrance, came a sound, a shuffling, of old boots. Gregory Miller, the same man whose voice had cracked in humiliation hours earlier, the same man who had nearly lost everything at Eli Carter's desk. He was back, still holding the wrinkled manila folder, still gripping the photo of his 3 kids. But now he stood taller, straighter. "I came back," he said quietly, hoping someone would listen. Dwayne walked toward him, their eyes locked. "Mr. Miller," Dwayne said, "you're getting that truck at the price you were promised. Every fake fee Eli added will be removed, and your deposit protected." Gregory's eyes misted, but Dwayne wasn't done. "Your daughter," he said, "she's starting college this year." Gregory nodded. "Summit Autoworks," Dwayne continued, "is going to fund a full scholarship in her name." The entire room froze. Then came the silence, followed by something entirely different. Applause, not thunderous, not theatrical, but honest. The kind of applause that comes from people witnessing something rare: restoration, redemption, real leadership. Gregory didn't speak. He couldn't. His mouth opened, then closed, overcome. But the hug he gave Dwayne said more than words ever could. In that moment, everything changed. Not because a man got fired, but because truth took back the room. And Dwayne Johnson didn't just reclaim his business. He reclaimed its soul. The dust hadn't even settled when the first email went out. Subject line: full internal audit. All sales halted immediately. By nightfall, every contract from the past 6 months was being reviewed. Every Summit Advantage package, every ambiguous doc fee, every line item that had been slipped into contracts like a dagger behind a smile. It was all pulled into daylight. Dwayne Johnson didn't retreat into an office. He moved his workspace directly onto the showroom floor. A plain wooden desk, no mahogany panels, no tinted glass doors. Just him, a notepad, and a simple sign taped to the front that read, "How can I help?" It shocked the staff. For years, leadership was something they only heard about, not something they could talk to. Now, the CEO was sitting 5 feet from the vending machine, asking for their stories, and the stories poured in. Trina became the first to give a full written account of Eli Carter's manipulation tactics. How sales staff were given silent quotas for pushing value-added fees. How those who questioned the system were blacklisted, pushed to slow hours, or reassigned to back-office roles where they were forgotten. Her report included dates, names, and even screenshots of emails marked "Confidential, do not forward." Then came Damien, nervous but determined. His flash drive contained recordings, documents, spreadsheets, evidence of a systematic pattern of exploitation. Some of the files were spreadsheets with code names. One tab was titled "Bait and Close." Another, "Emotional Leverage Points." Dwayne's hands trembled as he opened those files. This wasn't sloppy dishonesty. This was engineered, designed, weaponized, and yet here was the twist no one expected. Some of the worst offenders were gone, but some of the people still working, had only stayed silent out of fear or survival. The debate began among the senior staff. Should we fire everyone who played a part? That's when Dwayne said it. If we do that, we're just doing what Eli did, wipe the surface and hide the stain. Some mistakes, he explained, came from culture, not character. And if they wanted to build something better, they needed to offer a path forward, not just a path out. So he instituted something radical, the redemption policy. Anyone who had participated in unethical sales tactics could come forward. If they disclosed everything, helped restore affected customers, and completed mandatory ethics retraining, they'd keep their jobs. But if they lied just once, they were done. It wasn't a clean sweep. Some quit, some refused, but others, dozens, stepped forward. A network of secrets began to unravel, and in its place, Something better started to form. One of the most unexpected revelations came from Katrina, a quiet bookkeeper. She had flagged suspicious deposits from Eli's off-the-books cash deals 5 months ago, but her report had been buried. "He called it an internal pricing incentive," she said. "Told me I was too new to understand how deals really worked." Dwayne promoted her the next morning. She became head of customer advocacy. Her first act? Contact every single customer who had left a complaint over the last year. Personally, one of those calls stood out. A woman named Arlene, retired school teacher, had been charged $3,600 in protection fees without ever seeing them itemized. Her husband had passed away weeks before. She had walked into the dealership hoping to buy a reliable truck to tow their old Airstream, now her only piece of him. The day she drove off the lot, she said she felt like she'd been mugged in. Daylight with a receipt. Dwayne called her himself. "Miss Arlene," he said, voice thick with sincerity, "we are refunding every penny, and if you ever want to come back, your next vehicle is on us." There was silence on the line, then a sniffle, then, "I never thought I'd hear from someone who actually gave a damn." Those were the stories that began to rebuild Summit Autoworks, not just structurally but spiritually. The logo remained, but everything beneath it changed. Every sales desk was fitted with a transparent, interactive screen, real-time price breakdowns, optional add-ons clearly explained. No tricks, no surprises. Every contract now began with a section titled, "Your Rights as a Buyer." It was printed in bold, plain English, not legalese, and every new employee was required to sign it before they were trained. Dwayne even reached out to Josh, the former salesman who had been quietly fired for refusing to play the game. They found him working at a parts shop in a strip mall, barely making rent. "We want you back," Dwayne told him. "Not just to sell, but to train," Josh returned, and his first training session began with a sentence no one expected. "We don't sell trucks here," he said. "We sell trust. If we lose that, we lose everything." The staff was stunned, not by the words, but by the fact that they finally meant something. Then came the community. Local news outlets picked up the story. CEO goes undercover to expose corruption, rebuilds from ground up. It went viral, but what really changed things was Gregory Miller. The man who'd once nearly been conned out of his savings became an unofficial ambassador. Dwayne invited him to speak to the staff. He spoke slowly, but every word landed like stone on steel. "You don't know what it feels like," he said, "to walk into a place hoping to provide for your kids and leave feeling like a fool. Don't sell trucks like that. You can do better. You're meant to." Nobody looked away, and from that day forward, no one forgot. Because now, every sale wasn't just a number. It was a name, a face, a future. And Dwayne Johnson, he didn't just save his business, he redefined it. It began on a Sunday, 6 months after the takedown. 6 months after Eli Carter was escorted off the property and trust was dragged, blinking back into the light. The lot at Summit Autoworks looked different now, not because of paint or signage, but because of energy. Gone were the practiced smiles and commission-hungry eyes. In their place, families, music, a father showing his son how to check engine belts, a mother asking real questions, getting real answers. This wasn't Customer Appreciation Day. It was Redemption Day. Free food trucks lined the perimeter. A bounce house pulsed with laughter near the used inventory section. The closed sales office sign hung playfully above a makeshift lemonade stand manned by staff and their kids. The smell of barbecue mingled with the warmth of something deeper, belonging, and at the center of it all stood Dwayne Johnson, not in a suit, not even in CEO casual, just a black tee, jeans, and the worn boots he'd worn undercover as Marcus. Taylor, they weren't symbolic, they were honest, the same way everything else had become. A small group stood nearby. Katrina, now leading customer advocacy. Damien, managing ethics training. Josh, recently promoted again, now head of sales. Culture, you ready to say something? Katrina asked, nodding toward the mic on the small, raised stage. Dwayne smiled but shook his head. Not yet. I'm watching. Because that's what this moment was for. Watching. Observing a community that had once been tricked, now choosing to come back, smiling without suspicion, asking questions without fear, and among them, moving with quiet confidence, was Gregory Miller. No longer broken, no longer bitter. He was shaking hands, pointing out features, telling folks how his daughter just finished her first semester with honors. His thank you letter, handwritten and heartfelt, was now framed above Dwayne's desk, right next to the dealership's first ever receipt, signed in 2008. They made a strange pair, those two documents. One represented the beginning, the other a second chance. And then came the moment Dwayne couldn't avoid any longer. The mic was waiting. He stepped up. No notes, no slogans, just him. 6 months ago, he began, his voice steady but rough around the edges. I walked through that front door pretending to be someone I wasn't, just to find out what this place had become. The crowd quieted. I built Summit with my bare hands, with my father's tools, with the belief that if you treat people, some stories end in silence, but this one ends in justice. Because when Dwayne Johnson walked through those doors, he didn't just expose a broken system, he rebuilt a broken trust. With truth, with courage, and with the kind of leadership we don't see enough of. So here's the question. Would you have done what he did? Would you stand up when everyone else stayed seated? Tell us in the comments. What would you do if you discovered your dream was being hijacked from within? Like this video if it gave you chills. Share it if you believe honesty is stronger than profit. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the system and restore your faith in humanity. Because this wasn't just a dealership story. It was a masterclass in what happens when the right person walks in at the right time and refuses to stay silent.